Welcome back to another update of my fixer-upper. Since I'm still waiting on foundation work to be done, I figured I'd keep doing small random projects inside the house. One of the things that really bothers me in the house is the closets. Most of the closets have extra shelves that were added to increase storage space. However, none of them match what was originally in the closet, and it's all very makeshift. Everything about the shelves that were added was just completely random, from the material to where it was mounted and how it was mounted. The shelves were usually either particle board or plywood. Typically, you would find both in the same closet. Sometimes it would be painted, sometimes it wasn't. Most of the brackets I removed were not secured to studs, they were simply secured to the drywall. And this would be fine if you were just going to put a light load on the shelf, but a lot of the brackets I removed that were in the drywall didn't even have mollies behind them. So the screw was literally just sitting in the drywall and nothing else, which meant if you just pulled on the bracket, it was going to take the whole thing out of the wall. So really nothing secured these shelves to the walls in most cases. The worst closet by far in the house was the closet under the stairs. Now all the shelves under the stairs were pretty short because it's pretty small space, but all the hardware was just completely random. So I had everything from Phillips head to star heads to flathead screws, all of different lengths. I mean, nothing was the same basically when I took everything out. Alright, now moving on from the closets, before the foundation crew comes out, I need to rip out the back deck. The foundation guys are going to be digging holes all along the back of the house, so I need to get the deck out of the way. I wasn't really sure where to start, but I decided that the railing would probably be the easiest way to begin this project. I was also a bit hesitant to get started because I probably picked the most humid day to start this project, and the mosquitoes were very active already, and so I was just thinking in my head at that time that like this was going to be a very long, miserable day out here in the humidity of all the mosquitoes. It is unfortunate that the back deck has to be removed, but it's in such bad condition it's not really much of a loss. I would say a majority of the railing was unsafe to lean against and was honestly more of a safety hazard than a safety feature, and frankly with the amount of movement it had, it really needed to go. And then there were several places on the deck itself where you really had to be careful where you stepped in case you might just fall through the deck. Most of the railing came down pretty easily just using the 4-pound sledgehammer. I did have one or two locations where I was forced to go get a drill and unscrew some hardware, predominantly some areas that were heavily reinforced with some screws. Most of the deck appears to have been built using bolts to secure it to the, or I should say most of the railing was built using bolts to secure to the deck, and then nails for pretty much everything else, but there were a few locations that were reinforced with screws and they sent them in every direction, so the hammer just wasn't cutting it. Alright, with the railing gone, I decided to start by removing deck boards over where the steps were, and after the first couple of boards, I started to realize that there was a pretty active ant situation going on in that area. Either there was a colony in the boards itself, or there was a hill under the steps, so I decided to leave that area alone for now and go to a different section. I decided to move on and start at the corner of the deck that pushes out the farthest into the yard. I would rip up the boards there and then follow them up as they get closer to the house, and then just keep following them as they move back towards the farthest corner of the house to rip them all out. So we didn't end up filming it, but at some point my non-DIY wife decided to help me, and we actually worked out a pretty good system where she ended up ripping up boards and I ended up hauling most of them away since I had to walk a good distance over to the driveway to stack them all up. And she did pretty well considering that she really hates doing DIY projects and hates being outside. But as it typically happens, I was reminded at some point as to why I don't normally let my wife help me with projects, because as I carried some boards away, she was attempting to remove a board and she slipped and fell backwards, and she unfortunately landed on a pry bar. Now luckily it was on its side and she didn't land on the sharper pointier end, and so all she ended up getting was a good sized bruise on her butt. But she conveniently kept that hidden from me until later on in the day so that she wouldn't get kicked off the job site. Unfortunately, we were not able to finish all the work the same day. It just ended up being too hot and humid, and by mid-afternoon, we were just way too dehydrated to keep going. So I ended up finishing off the rest of the deck over like 2 or 3 more afternoons, just coming out and doing a little bit at a time and to get it all hauled away and get the rest of it disassembled. One of the main issues we weren't able to finish it all in one day is as we got closer to the house, some of these pieces of boards got a lot sturdier. I'm guessing that the house helped block some of the rain, and so they just weren't as weathered and rotted basically over time as some of the boards farther out on the deck. So they were much harder to get off, and at times I had to get the saw out and cut some of them in half so I could get better leverage on them. The 2x8 frame pieces were actually still in pretty good condition, and thanks to the bolts that secured them, they were still pretty tough to remove. But the 10-pound sledgehammer made short work of them and gave them the attitude adjustment they needed. Unfortunately, you won't be able to see me finish the demolition of the back deck because I believe that footage was either lost or deleted somehow. I have a gap of about 40 videos that are missing between when this footage was filmed and what came next. So I believe the SD card that we were using at the time was the one that went bad, and the footage might have still been on the card, and so it's all gone. So with the back deck now gone, I'm just waiting on the foundation guys to show up. So I'm gonna do 2 little quick projects upstairs in the house. So first I'm gonna replace the original hardwired smoke detector in the home. This was the only one it had in the house and it doesn't even work. So I'm gonna put in a brand new one. And then right next to it is the upstairs thermostat, and I'm going to replace that with a new Ecobee unit so it matches the downstairs one, and then I can use the app on my phone to control both units at the same time from anywhere in the house. And if you would like to learn how to do either one of these simple projects, I have already released dedicated videos on each of these, so you can check those out on my channel as well. Okay, so the big day has finally arrived. This is day 1 of the foundation guys working on the house. I did not want to bother them during the day while they were working, so I waited till they left for the day and then came over and shot all my footage. So I will do my best to try to explain what's going on, but I'm no foundation expert. So you just saw 2 holes that they dug on the garage side of the house, and this is a pile of concrete cylinders and blocks that will be used to make the pilings, which will set into those holes, and then the house will be jacked up and then set on these pilings so that it doesn't move. Essentially, my house has a negative slope along the back of the home, and so the front of the house is high and the back of the home is low. So I'm having the back of the house jacked up to raise it up because you can really feel the slope of the home if you walk from front to back in the house, and it's especially bad in the back corner of the master bedroom where it's at its lowest point. There's going to be a total of 21 pilings installed around the home to be able to lift it up, and basically every hole gets 1 piling, but I have 2 holes that doubled up, so they have to dig 19 holes total. Moving on to day 2, they started digging the remaining holes and started installing the pilings into the holes that were already finished. You can see the top of the concrete cylinder just barely sticking out of the dirt, and then the concrete block that sits on top of it is for lifting, and so the jack will sit on that when they start lifting the foundation itself. By the end of the 3rd day, all the holes were dug, the pilings were all set in place, and their 20-ton lifting jacks were on top of the pilings ready to begin lifting on the morning of the 4th day. The final hole that was dug was inside the covered patio. We did briefly consider putting it in one of the closets in the garage, but the prime location was where the water heater was, so they ended up moving it to inside the patio. And so they had to cut the concrete out, dig that hole very carefully, and then put the 2 lifting jacks in there. Now you may have noticed some of the concrete blocks are different shapes, so majority of them are rectangles, and then a couple of them are more like trapezoid shape. I don't remember the exact reason why that is. I think it had something to do with how much lifting surface was available in those locations and the size of the hole. So on morning of day 4, they started the lifting process. My wife and I were there to watch it happen. One of the first things I had to do that morning was chisel out some of the mortar on the brick so that when they lifted, it wouldn't cause any issues, because that area had been filled with extra mortar to account for the negative slope on the backside of the house. So essentially it created a crack. They filled it in with mortar to cover up that crack, and now it has to be removed so that they can properly lift and not have it essentially bind and create tension during the lifting process. This is the power line that supplies power for the house, and it goes up the wall right here to the main box, and that gap underneath the line, that's from them lifting. So initially that line, when we showed up, it touched the dirt. Now it doesn't. These clips are of the master bedroom, and they are the cracks in the walls that appeared during the lifting process, which was to be expected, especially in this location of the house, because this was the lowest point. This area was 5 inches below the reference point, and so they did quite a bit of lifting here, and of course in that process it caused cracks in the drywall. So this is why I held off on doing any major work in the house until this was done. Here you can see what the piling looks like when it's fully complete. So this is after they've done all the lifting and they have set the foundation onto the piling itself now. By the end of the day, they managed to refill all the holes with dirt. There's still a little bit of cleanup, and they still have to put some new concrete down on the area in the patio where they cut the concrete out. The next morning they came back out and finished up. They covered up all the areas that they had been digging with pine needle to cover up the dirt to help protect it from washing away with the rain, and they finished patching the area in the patio with fresh concrete. So overall this took them, so this was day 5, so about 4.5 days of work to do all this. Alright guys, so that's it for part 2 of my fixer-upper. So now that the foundation's done, I'm going to finally be able to get started on doing some work on the inside, like painting rooms and just doing some of the more fun stuff. So hope to see you next time on part 3.